Hello everyone, thank you for joining our webinar session today. Just as a quick reminder, your microphones are muted by default. If you have any question, please feel free to type them in the question dialog box that we have for that purpose. Jennifer, it's all yours.
Thank you very much. So good afternoon or good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 4th edition of our Signals webinar. This series was launched a couple of months ago, just when the COVID crisis became global. And as we all learn to move from one phase to the other, we are keen to continue to share with you our learnings, and this will include fresh data, live local perspectives, and points of view that come from the work that we are doing around the world. Today, in our session, Simon will give us his update on the story so far and the evolving impact on people all around the world, with Hwang Lee, who is based in South Korea, who will give us her personal perspective from that country. Then we will have Supriya, who will be talking about innovating in challenging times, with a special focus on durables, services, and technology, and looking for hidden winners. And at last, Chris will take us into the world of new rituals in a low-touch world. So with this, I would pass on to Simon to kick off our webinar.
Thank you, Jennifer. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being with us today. What I'm going to try to do is, firstly, just briefly stop and have a look at the information that's become available, as if you like, the weeks have become months. The information has got bigger in terms of a resource base, so I'll quickly pause on that, but really then start to look ahead to this question of what happens next and start to see what clues we can find in the latest data around how behaviours in particular may start to evolve. And then, as Jennifer said, we're delighted to have Hwang Lee with us from South Korea to give us an eyewitness account of a country which, if you like, perhaps is further ahead, if I may call it that, than some others. And so I hope we've got a good introduction for you to the session. Just to kick off, in terms of what's available, your Ipsos colleagues will share with you the resources and the information sources that will be of most interest to you. But we do have everything in a single place on a special COVID web page, and I wanted particularly to highlight the countries that we have data on. So there's a gateway to just over 20 countries, each of them with their own resources to help you understand what's happening on the ground there. And just to give you a flavour, in the US, what they've done is bring together a compilation of what they have so far on all the different research themes around the coronavirus. And as Jennifer mentions, we've got some expert analysis coming later from Supriya and Chris. There's more of that on the site. And finally, just to help us all kind of make sense of it all, we bring it together every couple of weeks in a research digest called Signals. And that's just gone live actually within the last hour or two. So those are some of the resources that we have. And I've tried to provide links as we go through the session to different data sources. Talking of which, what happens next? And I think the big questions we're starting to think about is this question of people looking ahead and people also reflecting on their experience so far. Here are some questions around what people think of their government from the 15-country survey that we've been doing since the start of the crisis. And I share it with you partly because it's a key part of the story, but also because of the differences between countries. Two countries which in some ways might be obvious comparators, Spain and Italy, in terms of their experience or in terms of their region of the world, very different views on how well or not their government is doing in handling coronavirus. And similarly, the US, for example, around the middle of the pack, and others, Australia, Canada, India, with rather more positive ratings. So big differences by country. And the other thing to mention here are the changes over time. We asked these questions on the government a month ago, and it's fair to say this is not a linear experience, because some countries are moving in one direction, Australia, Canada, Germany, Mexico, people becoming more positive about what their governments are doing. Others, France, Japan, Russia, Brazil, views are becoming less positive. And I think that dynamic is something we have to be very much aware of, rather than assuming everything will follow a kind of rational order. Talking about the dynamics, one of the countries we've been tracking through the process is Spain. And there our colleagues have been asking a question where people have been self-assessing how they feel today. And 45 days in to the quarantine, I think it's fair to say that people in Spain are starting to look ahead. You'll see many people now at the kind of lower end of that chart looking forward, but with a mixture of relief and fear. Chris will talk about some of the emotions in a moment, but what I would say is that it's a reminder that people are not all at the same page. Some people still in an adjustment or an acclimatization position, and this also is evident when we look at France. Yes, 63% say they're ready to return to a normal life, but I didn't put that as a green. I put it as an amber because only a quarter of people say they're perfectly ready, and indeed many people say they're not ready, and it rises among people who have an ongoing health condition, or indeed many people like us on this call who are perhaps working from home and for whom going back to work may involve a certain number of concerns, not least about public transport. So fair to say that people are looking ahead, but it's not necessarily looking ahead to sunshine and a problem-free coming period. As we look ahead, one of the questions, of course, is how our behaviour is going to change. And I'm sharing with you some data now from the United States, where we've been asking people week on week what they've been doing recently. And I've picked out 3 themes which felt quite instructive, just in terms of markers for us to really watch around how behaviours may be changing. The first one is about going out to eat. Just 9% have done that in the last week, and it's quite striking really just how quickly that's changed, because as recently as the 13th to the 16th of March, that figure was 56%. But 69% say they've had a takeout meal, and it underlines perhaps the fact that people still want their leisure time. They may have less money and they may be very worried about the future, but they will take a moment to go out and, if you like, spend that time, in this case, in takeout meals. Second one is about self-quarantining. The headline on one level is that this is down from 53% on the 10th to the 13th of April. America starts to ease out of lockdown. Well, that's when you talk about staying at home for 14 days. But if you talk more generally about avoiding contact with others as much as possible, that's staying about the same week on week. And it's almost like that's a mindset that people's heads are in, at least for the moment, that we avoid other people. And that's something we'll really need to keep watching. And in that vein comes this question about how quickly things will change. At the moment, 69% say it's risky to meet friends and family, but it was 79% 2 weeks ago. And this question of perhaps how quickly we will feel comfortable, or at least less uncomfortable, about doing some of those things we were doing every day or every week in our previous lives is, of course, going to be something to watch. And just to finish on our tour of, if you like, different markets and different contexts, I wanted to share with you these numbers around the tracing app from New Zealand and from Australia. Partly because this will be part of the dialogue that we're going to see in many markets in the coming period. It raises such questions around future of technology and privacy and access to that technology, but also coming back to that point about context, because New Zealand and Australia may be 2 countries that one might sometimes bundle together in our analysis, and it just underlines that perhaps we need to be careful about doing that, certainly in this fluid times, and the individual markets are often what we need to look at and take learnings and take as case studies. So what I've done is also give you a pointer to another study we've done in 7 markets that gives the opportunity to drill down into some of those, let's say, case study markets. So it has Sweden and Austria, for example, who've also got their own particular journeys that we can take learnings from and perhaps use as reference points. And on that subject of reference points, we're so pleased to have Huang Lei with us. She's stayed up late because it's past midnight in Seoul. So thank you, Huang Lei, for joining us. I think the big issue that we're seeing, I suppose, those of us outside Korea, is that you're the country which had so many cases a couple of months ago, and in recent times the number of cases has slowed to just a small number. So such an interesting journey the country's been on, and we're fascinated in your take on what's happening on the ground. Tell us more about, let's say, the current mood in Korea as you see it.
Yeah, sure. Hi everyone. My name is Huang Lei. I'm Chief Client Director for Samsung account, and I'm based in Seoul, Korea. And it's really glad to share some positive news on COVID-19 situation in Korea, because recently we got very low cases, and today we got only 4 cases, but 3 of them are coming from overseas, not local infections, which is very good mood. Actually, we didn't do very strict lockdown, but still we were advised to stay at home during a couple of weeks. But the last Sunday, the central government declared the end of the strict social distancing, and now we moved to everyday life distancing, which is more relaxed one. Officially, we reopened most public places such as museum, galleries, or sports stadium, etc. And it's a really good thing is the professional football league and baseball league started from yesterday. Even though the crowd is not allowed it in the stadium, but still we could enjoy and be very, very excited to watching, by TV broadcasting. So people are really, really, happy about that. And last week we had 6-day the holidays, including Buddha's birthday, Labor Day, Children's Day, today Parents' Day, etc. So the people did a lot of local traveling and did a lot of shopping. We call it revenge shopping, because people were really, really crazy for buying something for themselves, because they think it's kind of a deserved gift for themselves.
Yeah.
So which is the found very interesting things. Still very cautious with masks and having distance and hygienic attitude, that I would say. But we have more relaxed and easy life here in Korea.
But yeah, I mean, it's so good to hear, if you like, at least some sunlight coming through, and because one of the big things people talk about is the Korean curve and the journey the country has been through from those very high incidence of early cases. As a researcher, what have you been seeing kind of in terms of how people's behavior has been changing during this very fluid period?
Right. Actually, the COVID-19 situation have brought tremendous changes in Korean society. I cannot, even mention everything right now. But if I were to pick a couple of things, the first one is about working from home, because Korean labor industry really desire to have those kind of things. But the Asian culture, we kind of community life. We eat together, we work together, we do something together. That's really important value before. But now working from home is more generalized way of working here. So that creates a lot of other following trends. For example, like we had more family time. So normally weekday we can't have dinner with my partner or kids, but last 2 months every day we had dinner together. And also we had more time staying at home, so we have a lot of hobbies at home and doing a lot of fun things at home with family. And also digital transformation is also big changes. So regardless of age, we need to learn to use more frequently and more smarter way of digital things, because we do a lot of online class, online work, virtual work. So my parents last month they bought their first smartphone, because they want to buy something online and they order something with smartphone. So I think that kind of trend will be continued even after the COVID situation. And what else? The socializing is really important value before, but now we need to get more individualized one to protect ourselves. That's a big change in Korea, I think.
Yeah, and how about you? I mean, as you know, you've been living through it. You've got your parents, you know, buying smartphones for the first time. You're having to adapt to all of the changes that you have that you've been having. What's recent weeks been like for you in your own life?
Right. The recent time is very unique experience to me as a, the global clients, lead. I'm quite used to, get together or the having meeting together, virtually. But even to me, it's far more, challenging time because I need to train myself for better productivity. How to concentrate on my work at home because my kids are always bothering me, and how to relieve my stress, control my stress, how to communicate well better with my clients as well. So that's a new thing personally. And what else? Having more time with family is, again, it's really, good to me because I have 14-year-old boy, son at home. Normally in Korea, those, kind of communication with, 14-year-old boys almost impossible. But I think I'm more confident to, having chat with him now because I knew him better and I understand him better, and it's good time. And also I found my talent for cook. So I shop many grocery items for cooking myself. So yeah, that's a kind of good changes to me.
Thank you. I mean, it's so interesting just to hear both the story and as you say, yes. I mean, I think I can sympathise with you because I was a 14-year-old boy once, so I think that's been a really good time and different time for you. I'm going to hand back to Jennifer in Milan now, who is I think going to be allowed out for the first time almost this weekend, aren't you, Jennifer?
Yes. So with the shutdown, the lockdown has been gradually reopening since Monday, but I haven't been out of home yet, but it'll come. So yeah, finally, it was great to hear your experience. I have a last question. So you've told us about what you've been through and shared personal views. What are you expecting next in the coming weeks and months for your life in Seoul?
Every day, the news program and media have a lot of, expectation, expectation, the agendas. So that many people say that a kind of unpacked service will be more popular in Korea, because now we can order, even small coffee using the kiosk in the cafe. So we don't have to meet any, person to get the order. And also the home delivery items, the delivery man just, drop the items in front of the door without seeing anyone. And also the doctor, the prescription we can get through online. So those kind of unpacked service. And also it should be well facilitated by, fast broadcasting system or the network system. So those kind of related industry will be booming. So that's a kind of, short-term, findings from my side.
So a lot of, let's say, new types of services and great use of technology, which sets very nicely for our next speaker. So thank you very much, Hwang Lee. That was spot on. Our next speaker, Supriya, who will be talking about innovating in challenging times and specifically about services, durables, and technology, which is very much in line with what we just heard. Supriya, thank you.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for being with us today. In a previous session of the webinar, we spoke about innovating in challenging times and focused specifically on fast-moving consumer goods. Today, we'll be talking about durables, services, and technology. Within the past few weeks, we've seen a very rapid change in consumer behavior. As we were hearing from Hwang Lee, that people are really trying hard to cope with the current situation, to remain productive, to remain creative, to remain connected with everyone. And some of the trends or signals you see in social media are things like Dalgona coffee. I hope you've heard about that one. People are baking bread from scratch. They're using Zoom calls to connect with people, remote learning, remote working. And then there are the TikTok fitness challenges and dance challenges. So this is all, people are really trying hard to rise above the confinement of their space at this time. And in order to do that, they're making investments in durables and services, things like bread machines, sewing machines, printers, laptops, monitors for productivity, delivery services, and of course, subscriptions for entertainment and learning and other things. So this is actually the first time that we are seeing this really strong pull from the consumers. They are actively seeking service-based and technology-based solutions. This is a very, very unique situation because in the past we've seen it takes a long time for consumers to adopt these solutions. A great example is mobile banking. It took such a long time to convince people to start using their apps to deposit checks. They would still prefer to go to banks. But now the environment is forcing us to accelerate the adoption of these solutions. Of course, the first question that comes to our minds is, are we being insensitive if we reach out to consumers during this time? For that, let's look at China for some inspiration. We heard from Huang Lei about Korea. In China, we saw the ramp up of driverless delivery technologies, increased usage in online medical services. But the most surprising one for me was the explosion in high-tech beauty products. Local beauty companies were able to switch their business models within days to go from brick and mortar retail to being on social media and connecting with their consumers one-on-one. They were present and digital. They did not pull back their market presence. They were relevant and adaptable, aiming to be top of mind. And they were positive. They showed up with an eye towards the future and empathy for consumers. In order to understand consumer adoption in these spaces a little bit more, services, tech, and durables, we did a deep dive into the Ipsos Vantis concept testing database. This is the world's largest concept testing database outside of consumer goods, and it has 39,000 concepts across 66 countries. Now, the current crisis clearly isn't comparable to any previous ones, but the only common thread between the current crisis and previous ones is the financial hardship. So we looked at the recession years of 2008-2009, post-crisis years of 2010-2012, as well as recent years 2016-2019, to look at how response to innovation during these three time periods compares to the database average. Here's what we found. Across all three time periods, the consumer response to liking, value, and uniqueness remains almost completely aligned with the database average. What that means is environmental factors don't necessarily impact people's perceptions of what they like, what they value, or what they find unique. What's more interesting is when you look at purchase intent, intent to sign up, or intent to use, the primary intent question. We've clearly seen certain categories are seeing heightened demand and others are being challenged. But when we look at the data, in 2008-2009, the previous crisis, there was a slight decline in interest. And this persisted in the post-crisis years. So while the change in behavior happens very rapidly, it takes time to come back to stability. There's a ramp of 3 to 4 years from the start of a crisis until when the results remain stable. Think about the travel industry. Would you be willing to take a flight right away as the crisis lifts? Probably not. So really, we need to think about using this runway for innovation, for development for the future. And future-focused development involves looking beyond the obvious. Most companies want to see green flags on all of the KPIs so that they feel confident about moving forward with the right idea. However, given the current circumstances, we suggest looking at the profile of the innovation and not specifically the KPIs. We have a system called archetypes, which reveals the personality profile of the innovation. Things like breakthrough, premium, niche. And this is based on our history of testing, and there are 24 different archetypes. This is how it comes to life. So when you have all green flags, you have a winner archetype. But given the current environment, there is a likelihood, if you're in a change category, that your purchase intent will be depressed. So you'll have a promising archetype. These are still really good ideas that should be kept in the innovation pipeline, because as things gradually return to stability, these could be very successful. Another interesting archetype is breakthrough. Breakthrough ideas have low purchase intent and low value perceptions, but people like them and find them unique. It takes a lot of time and commitment and investment to actually turn a breakthrough idea into a successful product. Here are a couple of examples. First, Fitbit is a wearable activity monitor. When we first tested the Fitbit, the archetype was niche, and it resonated really well among young moms. The second one is iPad. When we first tested the iPad, it tested with a breakthrough archetype. Both of these products have, of course, gone on to be extreme successes. And to get there, the companies have had to work on providing clear communication, strong support, and a commitment over a longer period of time to support the product. To wrap it up, leverage digital channels, consider service models, demonstrate initiative, and respond to consumer needs in this current environment. There is a runway for innovation. As results remain valid for 3 to 4 years, make use of this runway to plan your future innovations and future-proof your business decisions by looking for hidden winners, by looking at the profile of the innovation and not just the KPIs. Finally, think about what you are doing to cope with this environment, what changes you have made in your lifestyle. I spoke to some of my colleagues, and most of them are investing in technology and services to cope with this change. Think about how your products will play in this evolving world. Over to you, Jennifer.
Lots of very good examples there. Thank you for sharing those quotes with things that people have changed in their lives. So you, Supriya, are very much immersed in technology for your work. So I was wondering, in your personal life, how have you leveraged technology to cope during this period?
Jennifer, the usual things like buying printers and things to remain productive, but the most interesting example for me is there was one week when my kids were not remote schooling and we had to find a way to keep them busy. And we were able to set up Zoom meetings with extended family that lives all across the world that kept them engaged, teaching them dancing, singing, all kinds of art. And the kids learned more about their culture during that 1 week than they have in a long time with me. So to me, that 1 week was literally the highlight of this lockdown and a good use of technology.
Great. Technology as a cultural enabler, that sounds very intriguing and very good. Thank you so much, Supriya. And now I will hand over to Chris for the last section of our webinar today on behavior change and rituals in this low-touch world. To you,
Very
Chris.
good. And Jennifer, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you fine.
Very good. Okay, so this is my second opportunity to speak on one of these Signals webinars. And for those of you who heard our first piece on brand, I shared this particular graphic, which helps us understand the drivers of brand selection. And as illustrated here, and I believe as was reinforced in Signals Part 3 by Benoit Tranzer, we are adaptive decision makers, and our behavior is influenced by a range of external and internal factors. And with the spread of the virus, it has essentially liquefied the stability of both our physical and social environments. So with our context so fundamentally shaken, we are basically operating in a fluid time of distress where we can't really depend on some of those automatic behaviors or mindless decisions that we used to make when we could choreograph our days pretty intentionally. Because our automatic behaviors have become a bit more deliberative, we are more in active listening mode. And that's particularly advantageous for brands because we are paying more attention to what brands say and what brands do in these times. So it is a critical and unique time for brands to both be present and, as Benoit communicated last week, to really lean in and get close. Just to be really clear, I think there were some comments earlier in the discussion about the appropriateness of brand. Almost everyone globally is quite concerned about the economy, their own personal financial situation. And there is an expectation that brands will not only help them navigate the crisis, but also continue to communicate with them about what they have to offer. People want to see evidence that economic wheels are indeed in motion. And even though the literature is quite thick with studies that will tell us that going dark in a recessionary period has proven to be a pretty poor choice, we still see a lot of advertisers either pausing or pulling campaigns. So again, while it's very important that we're not perceived as crisis profiteers, most consumers do understand that marketing serves an economic purpose, and they expect to see it, and they certainly don't look negatively upon brands for doing so. The other thing to consider here, and I mentioned this in the last webinar, we are living in an era where people are increasingly open to brands as opposed to traditional institutions to promote social progress, to promote well-being. And this current crisis could well accelerate that trend or that pattern if indeed brands do rise to the occasion. So let's have a quick look at kind of what that's meant over the past few months. So I think back in March, in early March especially, most brands were dead silent. And then you started to see some brands start to step forward as a source of truth and positive impact, and to start to express some really strong shows of empathy. And at that time, it was very welcome. I think any trusted source of accurate information was quite welcome at that time. And I think we've all probably seen this installation, of the Coca-Cola sign in Times Square, where it says, "Staying apart is the best way to stay united," along with the elongated brand treatment. And in its moment, just an excellent, well-timed, appropriately toned message. Since that time, I think it's fair to say a number of brands have jumped on that bandwagon, so much so that it's become almost impossible to differentiate, one spot from another that's trying to reach out and say, "Oh, we're empathetic, we're here for you," et cetera, et cetera. We're moving to a point where I think it's much more impactful for brands to start to recognize and affirm new social norms, and even help people start to build rituals at home and make it clear to them what their role is as they do so. We'll come back to that theme in just a moment. But first, let's take a quick step back and see how people are feeling kind of relative to this notion of settling into a routine. This is just an extract from our global tracker that Simon mentioned earlier. And in this particular question, we're just asking people to self-identify into one of 6 kind of coping stages. And the big takeaway from this slide is, most of us have moved either to or past a phase where we are developing a new set of routines. But routine does not always equate to comfort. Right. So as you take a deeper look into the people who are establishing new routines or have established new routines, you still see this international anxiousness around physical and financial health. So as consumers figure out their new set of routines, they are doing so in a general state of discomfort. So it's natural for brand leaders to say, okay, I want to understand which of these new behaviors, which of these new routines are going to be durable over time. You're starting to hear that expression more and more. We're also getting flooded with material speculating about the nature and the timing of the new normal, right? So as we start to address that, let's take a brief academic detour, and I promise it'll be brief, but want to talk about how routines become rituals and what that can kind of mean for brand strategy. So quick definition of terms, a routine, when I use that term, it's just a general pattern of behavior that's performed with little thought, right? But a more strictly observed routine can become a ritual if it starts to be imbued with meaning. And rituals often emerge in times of great uncertainty or great duress to allow us to feel a sense of normalcy. So I'm sure you're looking at that red text there and seeing terror management theory. And it's probably a good thing we didn't name this webinar Terror Management Theory, or God knows nobody would have turned up. So I won't spend too much time on it. But what it's basically saying is when people are afraid, or particularly when the specter of death is very real and quite salient, they start to crave cultural membership to build self-esteem. They start to crave ritualistic behavior because it gives them a sense of control. It gives them a sense of normalcy. Much has been written on this topic. And the other thing to keep in mind about rituals is they do fulfill a need. And then with each passing repetition, they get reinforced as they get easier and easier to perform. So when we think about durability, or the question of durability, we want to think about need fulfillment, meaning, ease of performance, and repetition. So in this kind of a new low-touch context in which we find ourselves, there is an opportunity for brands to start to connect with these new behaviors and to start to link their brands a little more inextricably with some of those new behaviors. So how do you become part of a ritual experience? We're suggesting a four-step program here. One, let's figure out of the new routines that are starting to be established, which ones can achieve ritual status? And then how do we infuse those things with meaning? Second, how do we drive internalization of enjoyable new habits that are meeting needs and they're easy to perform? And how do we start to affix benefit associations with those? The third bit is very important. Because brands can help illustrate a sense of shared experience. When we try something new, or we do something new within the confines of our own household, we're kind of wondering, are we the only ones doing this? Is anybody else doing this? Because if they are, and if we can start to demonstrate that others are doing this too, we create kind of the appearance of social normacy, and others are much more likely to repeat it. And then lastly, and this is true from almost any brand presentation, it is always important that what we say aligns with what we do, right? In terms of a brand experience that is reinforcement for brand communications. So given the nature of rituals and the potential emergence of so many new ones, it is an opportune moment for brands to identify potentially ritualized behavior, build benefit associations with them, affirm those behaviors, start to illustrate the sense of social consensus around them, and then to align your brand clearly with those meaningful behaviors. Now, this is an example from Europe. For those of you who are familiar with the brand BrewDog, they have begun setting up virtual pubs where people can enjoy online ordered drinks together with their friends. And they're picking up just on a very fundamental need people have to share drinks with their friends. It's something they really miss, right? And they have further imbued that experience with meaningful activities like music and comedy acts. You can also order drinks via their Hop Drop app. And so what they've really done here is create the essence of an English pub in an online environment. And what they're doing here is communicating the normalcy of a shared experience while showcasing their brand's role in facilitating that experience. So it's quite clever. There are a number of other examples we could give as well, but we're a bit short on time. So I'm going to conclude with the key takeaways here. One, brands do play an important role in the economic recovery. People get that. They're eager to hear from us as a result. They are also much more attuned right now to what we are saying. So it is a unique opportunity to really connect deeply, given the disruption that we're all going through, given that we've been thrown out of automatic rhythms and we are more attentive. Third, if we have a good understanding of rituals and how they develop, then we can start to figure out which routines might be developed to be durable, repeatable, and most importantly, associated with brand meaning. And then last, again, given we're in this state of disruption, this is an opportune time for brands to become central figures in the development of those new consumer rituals. Thanks so much, and back to you, Jennifer.
Thank you very much, Chris, for that great food for thought that you've shared there. And you mentioned at the beginning of your presentation, you talked a bit about advertising. And indeed, it's true that these days there's lots of advertising looks a bit similar. And there's even been some sort of fun videos about this. And
yeah.
I was Is it a complete waste of money for a brand to just be another brand that is saying we're in this all together?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think at this point, the truth is there's not much to gain from getting swallowed up in that same sea of sameness, right? And I think a lot of us have seen those parody ads that you're talking about where they poke fun at the number of COVID ads that follow that similar pace, that similar composition and scoring, and the use of repetitive terms like extraordinary times and we're here for you and we're all in this together. I mean, how many times have we heard that? And we know as advertisers and testers of advertising that if we don't get good brand linkage, we've essentially wasted our money, right? So if everybody's saying the same dang thing, then by definition, it's just not a great use of money right now. Much better for brands to speak in an appropriate tone, but drive home their own positioning. So yeah, great question.
Great. Another good piece of advice there. So thank you very much, Chris. Thank you very much to all the speakers and to all of you who have been with us today. And we look forward to seeing you at our next Signals webinar in a couple of weeks' time. Bye-bye, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Have a nice day.